Hey guys, time to discuss the book of the month. The book of the month was Highway to Swades, Rediscovering India's Superpowers by Bhairavi Jani. And I really enjoyed it, found it very insightful. Usually we do fiction. This is a non-fiction book after a long time. But I thought it was very, very interesting read. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Before I have the conversation or start the conversation with Bhairavi, let me tell you something about Bhairavi. Bhairavi Jani is a woman of many hats. She's a successful logistics and supply chain entrepreneur, a social development enthusiast, a nature conservationist, a committed philanthropist, World Economic Forum's global leader, and the national chairperson of Young Indians. And of course, now an author. Wow, that's a lot of hats. I find it difficult to read, forget writing the book. I don't find the time for it. And she's doing so much and writing a book. But anyway, let's get into the conversation with Bhairavi. Hi Bhairavi, welcome to Sonali's Book Club. We are really looking forward to this discussion. We have a lot of questions for you. And like I said in the intro, you really wear so many hats. There's so many things that you do. What I want to ask you is that when you do so much, what was it that made you turn into an author? What was it that made you write this particular book? What was this journey like?
So, Sonali, I was at a retreat in 2017 with some young children. It's part of the philanthropic work that I do, where we work with school children, actually, young adults, in talking to them about what role they could play in building society and nation, etc. Right? This was on the banks of the Ganga at Rishikesh. And it took me back almost, I don't know, 13, 14 years to the time when I was in the same place, much older probably when I was 23, 24, when we were just starting the Young Indians group in CII, 30 of us, and we had a similar conversation. And I realized that at that point in time, when I was 23, 24, there was a lot of confusion inside me. We all go through this identity crisis, right? Who we are, and then we go out in the world and we come back and, we have this acceptance rejection that goes on. And at that point in time, I was in a huge identity crisis about my identity as an Indian when I was 23, 24. But then I had spent many, many years after that traveling to some of the most remote part of this country for my work, for the philanthropy that I do for Young Indians, where we were, opening new chapters. And I learned a lot, and I realized that my relationship had settled. And I thought for my generation, in contemporary world, nobody had written about this. The last was maybe the Nehrus and the Dindayal Upadhyayas, and said, what about our generation that has, of course, had its own history, its own narrative about exploring their identity as an Indian. And I thought nobody had written about it, and I should write about what was my journey. How did I come to see it, and what have I learned? And I should share that. I didn't have a book in mind because I was petrified of the process. So I thought I'll write blogs. And so went a couple of years till a lady wrote about me in a book she was writing about daughters of legacy. I come from a legacy business. So I asked her, I said, how does it work? And she introduced me to an agent. You come from the film business. I come from also logistics business. The agent is a very sometimes not comforting word. And so I was like, what is an agent? Agent kaise hota hai? So I took my husband along with me for that meeting because I said, I don't want to give any wrong signals here. And I met Kanishka Gupta from Writer's Side, who's been my agent. And he gave me then the framework to write. How does a book proposal work and how do you do? And I think the collaborative part of the whole process excited me so much that I decided to jump at it.
Wonderful. But, when you said there was so much that had happened, and you said something about trying to find your own identity as an Indian. You come from, like you said, a legacy family, and you've studied in the cities. You've lived in Mumbai, if I'm not mistaken. You've grown up in Mumbai. You've studied in the US. So, and then you've done this traveling, and now I think you're settled in Himachal Pradesh.
No, I live half the year in a place called Munsiari in Uttarakhand. I call them my boondocks.
Oh my God, yeah. So, but just before you kind of shifted there, when this traveling that you were doing and, like the identity crisis that you had as in identifying what does it mean to be an Indian? did you find the same crisis, if you can say, or kind of conflict in all the people of your generation when you were traveling uh, across the length and breadth of the country? The younger people, I would say, the younger generation, which
I
was
think
your generation, in the B towns, the C towns, in the rural areas, did they also have this problem? Or because a lot of times you think that, when you've been brought up in cities, because the cities of India and the villages of India are like two different countries. So is it because of that that you had an identity crisis, or did you feel that the generation all across the country is having this identity crisis?
Well, I think in some measure, all of us were. I think even those who come from the so-called Bharat, I call them the Bharat Wale and the India Wale, the ones, all of us who grew up in metropolis. Since 1991, when the liberalization took place, the kind of changes this generation has seen, the ones who grew up in the 90s, if you would say, we were in our teens and 90s, we saw the time when there was only Doordarshan, and then we saw the time when there was hundreds of channels, right? So we've all transitioned that, irrespective of where we live today. Our cinema has changed. The narrative and stories, for example, that anybody, whether it's somebody in a Bareilly who goes to watch a movie, or someone in a Mumbai who goes to watch a movie, will see a different kind of narrative and story on celluloid today, right? So our press has changed, our media has changed, our experience of the world has completely shifted in the last 20-25 years, if you think about it. And I think that I found in everybody, pretty much, not just in, I went to smaller places in, far off corners in the Northeast, and there was this question. The specifics around the identity crisis may be different. Somebody may be struggling about, if I'm from the Northeast, I'm struggling about the larger identity crisis, about how am I part of the larger Indian story.
Right.
And someone from a Mumbai or Delhi might be struggling around, hey, I'm very proud of culturally who I am, but this mess is not making sense to me. This chaotic political economy is not making sense to me. So the specifics of the confusions are different. But I think this whole generation, because of the transition it has had, it has lived through this crisis about who we are and where do we go from here, from a family of middle class savings to, coming to people who are ready to spend on EMIs to buy a phone. That's the transition everybody has seen. And I think that generation everywhere has asked this question at least once, who am I? What am I doing here at the end of the day? And I think that's what I wanted to answer.
So again, I get, who am I? What am I doing here? Is the question you're answering, and I get that. But again, like I say, that what is it that you felt in your journeys that was so? What was your answer? What was it that you found? Or let me put it this way: that how did you find your Indianness?
Well, I think I realized that despite so much of differences and diversity, because we whether it's in our school or in our popular narrative, we pay a lot of focus to the diversity, and rightly so, because we are a mosaic. We're not a melting pot, as I say in the book. But I think I also found a lot of commonalities, common value systems, about how we treat people who are different than us. How do we talk to strangers? How do we welcome people who are from abroad? How do we, treat teachers, and how do we treat education? And, they were things about our daily life, but I thought that that's what bound us together, instead of, the so-called idea of, you're part of this big republic. Everybody knows that, and everybody will go and unfurl a flag at once, whether on 15th or 26th. But I think it was these things that kind of tied and connected me to people everywhere. And I saw that across the organizations that I was part of, the organizations that I was running, that people were bonded, that they had certain common set of values. And those values were uniquely Indian. They didn't come from the East or the West, and they belong to the people of India. And that's why I call them the superpowers in the book, because I think those are values that we have sometimes even unknowingly inherited. So it's like telling Hanuman, tum mein bhi Shakti hai, wake up, and these are your superpowers. I think I found that everywhere, and it fascinated me, and it allowed me to come to terms with my identity, because I suddenly realized that all that confusion that I was having, it really was lack of my understanding. And the travel.
All the things that you talk about are cultural in that sense. So that means it's a cultural aspect, you think, that kind of binds us together in spite of all the diversity in the various regions. You think it's some sort of a cultural identity that binds us together, which say might not be the same in the West, and that's the difference.
I don't know about, I don't know if I would juxtapose it to West or East, but I would just say
Because
that.
so many of the things, like, you know, when you welcome a guest, or, you know, you're kind to a stranger, it's humanity. And sometimes, you know, these are the things that human beings, and if you're in touch with your humanity, it is something that you will find in a lot of parts of the world. It's not like you will not find it there. Like if you go into maybe more of the remote parts of the world, you will find it over there. So is it something more cultural rather than Indian, or would you still say it is Indian?
Well, I too think that, of course, one finds warm welcome in many, many places, but one doesn't find that kind of openness, to interact, to engage, to welcome people in their homes. I've been on roads where people have just opened their doors and said, come and stay at our home at night. You can't go forward. I like you have been around the world, and there are friendly people everywhere, but people not take you a stranger in their home. It's small things. It's about the touch. For example, Indians in rural India will very happily touch you. This touch I don't find in any part of the world, because women in South India especially would have a problem because my hair used to be open, and they would want to tie it and put a malli and a gajra around it, saying, no, you can't be walking around like that. And I think that ownership of somebody who's just complete stranger, whom you don't know where they came from, what's their faith, and no questions asked. I think nobody asked me what faith I came from and where I came from. The only thing was, okay, you're here and you need food, or you need direction, or you need a place to stay. And I thought that was fascinating. And what we do with that openness is more fascinating, right? Which is that we take something that comes from outside, and we've done this for centuries, if you see culturally, and we merge it with what we know, and we create something new.
It's very uniquely Indian, you would say.
Yeah, the Sufi dargahs and how we decorate them, for example, and Mumbai, for example, and all its Indo-Saracenic architecture, or the Chinese, the Indian Chinese that the poor Chinese would not recognize. I saw those examples everywhere, and I said the way we assimilate, the openness and the courage with which we assimilate. I don't think other cultures do that. I mean, they take a very, very long time, and many don't. Many are very, very close, especially the older cultures. So I thought that was very, very interesting, and it made us very uniquely Indian. I'll tell you a story. I was driving from Imphal in Manipur to Kohima in Nagaland, and I saw this Caucasian man walking on the road. So we stopped the car and we asked him, saying, hello, what are you doing walking on the road? And he said, I'm Cedric, and I'm walking from Singapore to France, and I'm a Frenchman.
Okay.
And I said, okay. So he said, I walk 40 kilometers a day. And I said, do you want to tell us more about what you're doing? He said, the only thing I want to tell you is that when I entered from Myanmar through the Moreh border into Manipur, the experience completely changed. People were warm, and I suddenly felt that I was secure and safe, and I would be helped no matter what. And that, coming from someone who was walking from Singapore to France in 2014, came as a very big. And that's how you can understand how Huat Sansang or Marco Polo and Ibn Battuta would have come and experienced this country, right? Because it was just an open book; anybody could just come and read it.
So do you think, in a way, you mentioned the word, I mean, it's a fascinating story, and you used a word which was called, that there was this sort of a openness which took courage, and it's like brave to just let people in and do that. So somewhere that, and with all the especially after COVID, with all the mental health issues that we are looking at and everything, this kind of a openness, this kind of a welcoming takes a lot of courage, and we understand that more and more. This kind of courage, in what other parts do you see this kind of courage where India is concerned? Like, I do find that, do you see that in the entrepreneurship also? Do you think it is possible? Because India is all the communities in India are not known for their entrepreneurship, or, inventing new things. I mean, even if Indians are doing it and they're at the forefront of all the cutting edge places, they're still working for somebody, rather than going out there and doing it. Yes, the numbers are changing, but that's how it has been. So do you think that can be applied, this kind of courageousness can be applied there also? What is your take on that?
Well, I think we're such an enterprising country, Sonali, and I can't tell you how. I mean, I have seen people of all ages. A guy in Tripura taking clay and working a natural filter system out. I have seen a young boy. I mean, I mentioned him in the book. Start 38 companies by the time
Yes,
he's 27.
Stories in the book. It was
And
fascinating.
and I train small entrepreneurs across small India all the time in our foundation, and I see it, this massive bravado about just jumping at something, trying something new is there, is definitely there. The reason sometimes it doesn't find scale is because we haven't built the ecosystems for that to happen. So somebody may start, they may take a company from 0 to 2 crores, but for 2 crores, 20 crores, they need help. They need guidance. And I think we haven't created a lot of systems around that until recently. I think of late, there's a lot of help to entrepreneurs that is coming, especially in large metros and urban areas at least. But I think if we do that more and we equip our young children in school itself, like we've done with computers in the 90s, if we equip them with, entrepreneurship as a life skill, then they will bring that approach to everything, even if they're working for someone, right?
How do you think we should equip them?
Sorry?
Because you work a lot with the children, and you work a lot with the learn. How do you think we should be equipping them?
I think we should definitely treat entrepreneurship as a skill in schools. I think we have to change the way we teach. We have to allow the creativity. I mean, look at how creative this country is. I think you just see the YouTube content that's out there that Indians put out. It's massive, and I think we haven't done enough to even fill up that. So creativity or enterprise, these are all individual need for expression. Expression of self-expression, of aspiration, expression of ambition. And I think the school system has to be prepared for that. So what we've been following till now, which is sort of preparing people for an industrial age reality, which is that, large set of people have to work in large processes in one particular way, has to shift. Because now is the age of creative economy, now is the age of enterprise economy, knowledge economy. So how we construct our schools also have to completely change. And the way I would do it is I would really unbox the school system, unbox the college system. I mean, why can't a musician also be a biomed major? I don't understand that.
I actually understand what you're saying. And for the longest time, from the time I was a student, this is a question I've been asking, because especially the creative people amongst us have always felt stifled in the education system that we've had, because it is great for the STEM kids, but really not for the others. It's changing very, very slowly. But also there are Indian parents who want it to be the STEM and the mathematician, and everything else is really not so going. So till you don't go out and kind of till there are not these kind of examples and things that are going right for people who are not doing your regular what goes on in schools and only succeeding from the marks that they get from there, till that is not highlighted, I don't think the parents are going to change, and hence the generation will keep having that pressure. Just on a side, because with this topic came up, and it's one of my pet peeves, or I would say like a thing that really, I do feel that this age is the chance where we can do this unboxing, and I think tech is going to be the way that it can be done. I don't know how. I would love to know how. And here I'm digressing from the book a bit, because you have given it so much of a thought, and because you've traveled so much. How do you think that can be done? If there are any ideas, I would love to know, because I think that's the only way we can kind of get there, and there are times when I find that the YouTube is teaching students much more than the schools are. I mean, controversial thing to say, but it does happen.
It does happen. And so, I mean, I would say there are 2 or 3 things that we should learn from different systems. One, our own. So Nalandas and Takshashilas were all multi-faculty institutions. They did not just teach one subject, right? And I think that we have to remember that although there was mastery allowed in one subject, but they were all essentially multidisciplinary schools, and that's why people came from all over to study them. So we have this background, which we should go back to and refer to. That's one. 2, I think what today technology has allowed you to do is that it's allowed you to access education material and educators everywhere. India has the largest K-12 system in the world, right? 250 million children in 1.5 million schools, but more than 400,000 schools are only single teacher schools.
Right.
I live in a rural area. I know how those schools run, and sometimes the teacher turns up, is not turned up.
Don't.
He's a class 5 Hindi teacher, and he can't teach class 10 math, for example, or can't teach music. So I think today, with the kind of, first of all, with the kind of digital infrastructure that's already in place, we have the ability to create hybrid learning models, in which we have to teach our teachers also, train our teachers also. I see in rural schools that some of us, support in Gujarat, the teachers have started using smart boards and using YouTube to teach children what they can't explain because, they don't know everything about astrophysics there is to know. So I think the curriculum has to be rethought. The process has to be rethought. And most importantly, like you said, the outcome also has to be rethought because it's not about that you have to finish everything in one go. Like, learning should be a continuous process. And this, at 12, everything I need to know about history has to finish is a wrong notion altogether in today's world. And I think there are many examples like what edX has done, for example, or Coursera has done, and Zoom has kind of, with the pandemic opened up learning capabilities. So definitely IT, and I think in time to come, gamifying, augmented and virtual reality will change everything, Sonali, about education.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I wrote a book called The Modern Gurukul once I turned parent, and the whole, every time that I was trying to find out how my son should be educated, the thing that I kept, that's why I called the book The Modern Gurukul, because what I figured was exactly what you said. Be it the Gurukul system or be it the universities, from astronomy to everything is part of the curriculum, from music to your social behavior. The idea was that you sent out to the world a well-balanced human being. That was the idea of the schools and education systems at that point of time. And somewhere we've had it and we've lost it, and we just need to go back. And that was one more thing that was fascinating about this book, because when you understand, the day we start understanding our Indianness, I think we will connect with all of these things and kind of go forward from that. So, like I keep saying, that another reason why this book was so fascinating for me. As I was reading the book, I saw that it was very well structured, and you like organized. It explains each superpower and etc. So you told us how the idea came to you because of the blogging and everything. But what I wanted to know was it your travel first, or were you like, and then you broke it down to these various superpowers, or somewhere you kind of had this in your mind and, you went on the travels to kind of find them and figure them out? What came first?
So no, the travel came first. And I must tell you, when I set out to travel, I had a friend, he's an Indologist, sort of a Indologist, not by profession, but out of passion, out of profession. He's an innovation expert. He had another friend who was a rally driver. And then there was a cinematographer, all three Tamil men who didn't speak any Hindi. So they were practically useless after Orissa as we started driving north from Chennai. And it was election time. And, when I set out, I had a lot of questions. Of course, you have these assumptions that I want to know this, I want to know this.
Okay.
And, we were all trying to outdo each other's knowledge, except for the cinematographer who had, poor boy, never been outside of Tamil Nadu in his life. So he was, apart from that, the three of us were well traveled already. We were just doing this one long trip across the country at the same time for the first time. And we were trying to outdo each other's knowledge. And after the first week, it just seemed so futile because collectively our knowledge was not enough. And the Indians everywhere were just taking over. The stories of the people, the stories of the places. And, I dropped everything. I just dropped trying to search anything. And I just said, let it all just come. Opened my heart out completely. And I think the barrier was broken between me and, I was looking at what you were mentioning, the Indians in the hinterland more as a fish in a bowl, sort of somebody I have to observe in, like in a lab. And I think that broke. There was no more that separatedness. And I think then India took over. Sonali, the way it took over is magical. It can only happen when you're on road in this country and you meet people everywhere. And from that came a lot of learning. And it is much later that I was able to deduce what I had learned, because once then I was in the flow. I paid zero attention to what even I was deducing. I was just in the flow. And I think it was the most magical thing I have ever done in my life. I would do it anytime again, given a chance.
So how many kilometers was it?
It's 18,181 kilometers.
And in about what, 51 days?
51 days, about 350 kilometers a day.
How did you plan the itinerary?
No plan. We had a friend who was running for his Lok Sabha election for the first
What
time.
do you mean by no plan? You've done 51 days of this.
There was no plan. I mean it. So I actually went, and I think my mother called, spoke to my dad and said, she's going with 3 men. So he said, Acha, and then she was like, what will people say? And she said, she's going to put everything on social media. Log kya kahenge, And my dad was like, listen, I don't think we need to worry about it at all. And if anything, you should call up the families of those 3 men. We know our girls. So thank God for that. But no plan. We knew we wanted to go north from Chennai. Meet our friend who was running his first maiden Lok Sabha election in Guntur in Andhra Pradesh, and then go to northeast and go north and come south again. Okay. But after we crossed Guntur, we said, nahi, thoda planning hona chahiye. So we sat down in Guntur and we planned some things, made some calls and around some dates or whatever. But largely we kept it pretty flexible because, if you, like I mentioned to you, Cedric, if I met a Cedric on the road and I'm interviewing him, I'm spending time, then I don't want to be under the pressure to reach the next place.
Right.
I want to have the experience broadened and deepened by having the time to do so. But general direction that, no, we must reach there because then we have to get somewhere, and keep going forward. Apart from that, no, there was no plan.
Sorry?
I said, apart from that, no, there was no plan.
But, okay. So no plan, and yet you've traveled so much. So what are the key travel lessons that you've picked up, so that we become better travelers too? Considering that I'm going hyper every time I'm traveling with, have I forgotten something? Have I done something? I mean, we all try to be so organized when we are traveling. So can you please give us some travel lessons?
I think one, just know that the journey is very, very important. So, I think a lot of people are just focused on getting to a destination, but the journey is very important, especially when you're on the road. When you're on the road, that's very critical. Otherwise, don't be on the road. I mean, you do point to point, then you fly or take a train. Second, I think just travel smart. Know your clothing. Make sure you know that you're not going to get to what.
Sorry to interrupt, but you said fly or take a train, don't take the road. But I thought the Indian railways were so interesting also. They have of their own.
Yeah, they are. No, they are. I mean, but still you have a begin and an end journey, right? You have stops. I think if you truly want to let go of any limitations, then road is the right way to do it. Just travel smart. I mean, you should know that you're not going to get time to wash your clothes that often. And, especially women, toilets, be ready for bush stops. Toilets are not clean everywhere. And I have horrid stories. Anybody tells me one thing you want to change in this country, I say, toilets, just toilets.
Toilets. I agree with you so much. And I must share something with you. I mean, I started my work in the 90s, and the whole production that you see today of the vanity vans and so was never there. So we are very used to the bushes, please believe me. And when we were working, I was probably me and the hairdresser would be the only women in the unit. So yeah. And if you were shooting in a village, you had the whole village following you everywhere. So to find that you have to announce it to everyone that guys, just block off this area, the whole unit had to know and the whole village had to know that she needed to use the bushes. So please, can you all back off, etc. So yeah, I have been through that and I hear you on that. But
yeah, and I think the last is, of course, know your general direction. Why are you on this drive? That's important. If you're on a particular trip, you should know the purpose of your journey. It's like this concept of yatras that is there in our country, right? Like yatras have a purpose. That's why they are yatras. So whatever is your purpose, you should know your purpose so that you don't get lost. Otherwise, sometimes it's good to get lost also.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Difficult for for a OCD like me to do, but this is something that you can always aspire to do, and it's never too late. But yeah, like you said, it's so interesting to be able to just say that, yeah, this is it. Pick yourself up and go and find stories. Very very interesting. Um, yeah, so like I said, that you met a lot of people and you spoke about this guy from Sikkim, who's like initiated 38 enterprises and all. It's like at the beginning of your book. So like I had asked you, how many more of these kind of people did you see? That was it. Let me put it in a better way. That was it like a area specific that you saw more entrepreneurship, or was it something because we all have our okay, let me just say it, I might not be politically correct, but you know how we say, oh, the Gujaratis are the entrepreneurs and these are the, we have those boxes that we all put people in. So my question to you is that in these journeys of yours, how many of these boxes fit and how many were totally misplaced?
I think about enterprise, I had this box, which, I thought, entrepreneurs were all these yuppie startup people like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Bombay, Delhi kids who like do their startup stuff. And we were driving from Araku in the Eastern Ghats in Andhra Pradesh to Koraput in Odisha. And we saw this tribal market of this tribes, the Bhumia, Paroja, and Gond tribes who live in that area.
Mm.
And I saw these women. They came in this trucks, overloaded three-wheelers. How the hinterland people travel. They're forest people. They came with forest produce. This amazing market, took place, and these women sold everything they brought. Yeah. How are they not entrepreneurs? And so that trip kind of just made me realize that entrepreneurship was not something you did, but it was a skill and a way of life. And I think most Indians everywhere have it in relative measures. The Gujaratis tend to, and I'm a Gujarati, so I can say that the Gujaratis tend to have more conducive environment for it because
Okay.
families have been in business or the ecosystem in the state is such. And maybe in another state where I have worked a lot, which is Meghalaya, when I started working there, people were not naturally enterprising, but once they were given the tools for it, they took off. And I mean, I saw creation of 4.5 lakh new entrepreneurs in a period of 5 years, just because the government got its act together and created that system for it. Beekeepers and piggery units and women who got into smoking fish and amazing work. And I think therefore we should not think entrepreneurship is about running a factory or a call center or doing something out of I don't know, WeWork space somewhere, but it's something that you do. It's about having an idea, taking the risk, finding a solution to meet a gap in the market or in society. So yeah, everywhere.
How many other such boxes were kind of opened up for you? How that the boxing that we do for everything in it. How many other such boxes kind of opened up and you were like, okay, done with the boxes?
I thought that there were a lot of that I thought that Indians held on to their religious identities very strongly, and that Indians had to be pushed by the so-called construct of the constitution to become secular. The kind of mental modeling I had was that. And then what I saw on the trip in terms of how people of different faith, different ways work together. It just kind of, at some point I said, what nonsense am I talking? I met this guy called Lawrence Coach in a small valley called Zero Valley in Arunachal Pradesh. It's near the border with Tibet, China. And Lawrence introduced himself to me in this way. He said, hi, I'm Lawrence, and I am the chief volunteer worker for the world's tallest naturally formed shivling. So I did a double take. I said, excuse me, you're Lawrence? And he said, yeah, I said, you're Christian by faith? He said, yes. I said, all your practices are Doni Polio, which is nature worship because you're from the tribes in Arunachal Pradesh. So how have you become this volunteer for this shivling? So he said, no, a couple of years ago, we found this Lingalayam outside our village here. Then we didn't know what to do. So then we went to Somnath, we went to Rameshwaram all the way. And Rameshwaram from Arunachal Zero is like 3,800 kilometers.
Right.
And we got 108 priests from there. And we reconsecrated this Lingalayam, which is now a Siddheshwar Nath temple, and I am its chief volunteer worker. And I say, nobody has taught this guy anything. And yet his ideas are so clear. And I asked him, I said, don't you find it conflicting, nature worship, Shiva, you're Christian. He said, no, being with Christ is meditation. Shiva is meditation. Nature worship is meditation. Everything is meditation. And I said that, what are we talking? We do not need somebody else to tell us how to live this. People of India already know. I think time and again, of course.
We just need people to stop interfering.
Yeah, just let people live. There are some things, just don't interfere. 10,000 years, people have figured who they want to worship, what they want to eat, what they want to speak, how they want to dress. Mat pado isme. Let it continue. 10,000 years it's going on. It will change. If it changes, it'll change in its own natural course. Like how things have happened with the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, or how they have happened with the Dakkani Tehzeeb in Hyderabad. When people in large ways migrate, things will change. And of course they'll change. I mean, now, momos are available on streets of Chennai. I never thought that would happen in my lifetime. Right. So I think that's a very important lesson I came back with. Another
obviously what you're talking about. I mean, forget us, all of us in India knowing these, the unboxing of this kind of a thing, if that's the right word to use, I would say. But this is definitely not what is thought of us outside the country, and but this is what we need to know, be in touch with, and let the world know that this is what it is actually, rather than forcing certain things which are not really us down throats. And how do you think we can get this message across?
I think we should be, as I said, we should know that our way has been the collective way for such a long time. From the time we built the Indus Valley cities, I mean, look at the way they were built. They were built for communal living, right? So nobody needs to teach us how to live together. Ours is the only constitution which has due regard to fraternity, not just liberty and equality, because both are systems where in the political world.
If I'm not mistaken, in the digging up of the Indus Valley civilization and all, did they find temples there?
They found worship places there, of course. And, in Dholavira, for example, in Gujarat, they found stadiums, that could accommodate 10,000 people, sewage systems. These are all ideas about how we are living together. And, when you talk about what the West says, I have lived in the United States, so I know where you're coming from. And I was once asked this question that, based on narratives that fly left and right about, do you think your country is becoming more intolerant? Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, let's define tolerance. See, I said, you think of tolerance because you still think of somebody of another faith as the other. I don't, and I'll tell you why I don't. Because when I went to school, I got chutti for Diwali, I got chutti for Eid, I got chutti for Guru Parab, I got chutti for Christmas. Full 7 days I got chutti for Christmas. Okay. I said, your kids only get chutti for Christmas. So your kids don't know that other faiths are equally important. Our children know this from childhood. Nobody has to teach them that because everybody gets holiday for every faith. Everybody celebrates everything. So for us, we have a process of acceptance. We are not tolerating those who are not from our faith or our race or our language.
Such a harsh word, tolerating. I mean, it is just so.
I said, you tolerate because you're still othering. You are tolerating. We don't tolerate. We accept. And please understand, when you accept, questions will arise. Questions will arise about new ideas and how they affect. And in a democratic society, and India has been so even before it was a republic, these questions will be debated. They will be countered, and new schools of things will come up. Even in Hindu faith, there are 6 schools. In Islam, there are many ways.
India has been democratic since before it was a republic. I mean, we were always ruled by kings and monarchies. And so how would you say that we're still, how is it that it is so accepting, and how come
societal way, Sonali, was very democratic. So, even though your polity system was not democratic, you had a monarchy or you had something else, but go back to the Sanghas of the Buddhists. Go back to the way our Upanishads are written, for example. They're not handed down by somebody getting some idea and writing down. There are conversations and debates, most of our Upanishads. And similarly, that's been our way. Whenever a new, so it prompted a Dara Shukho to kind of, write, Majnu and Bahrain, and sort of say that, what are the thoughts that are connecting between Sufi Islam and Vedantic Shivism. I mean, only a Mughal prince in India could do so, because this has been our way. When I say democracy, I don't mean in terms of a political idea. I mean in terms of a way of life. There's been freedom to pursue that individual idea and continue your way, approach God in the way you like for so many years, that we take it for granted. That's why I said we have a process of acceptance. We're not tolerating at all.
So the key here in what you said, I would just want to reiterate, is the debates. You said the debates is what is the important thing. That's where the ideas kind of make sense when you have civil debates. And from when you say that, I remember, like, the stories always tell you that even if it was a monarchy, the whole debating system in the courts of the kings has always been a very, very vibrant and robust system. I mean, I'd forgotten about it, but yes, I'm going to remember this. So debating is what it is what made us a democratic way of life, and not the monarchies or the political way. Very, very, very interesting again. Thank you, Bhairavi. That was a very, very interesting thought. So, you met so many interesting people, inspiring people. What is it that you would say that in this 51 days changed you for sure? Is there something in your core that, like, you changed and you can never go back to doing again? Something like that.
So not in this 51 day, but a trip I took before that, Ladakh, in middle of winter, and I talk about it in the book. There is a tribe in Ladakh called the Changpa, and they live on the Ladakhi adjunct of the Changthan plateau. And I was invited by my host in Ladakh to go and see their way of life in middle of winter. Ladakh's cold. It's a cold desert, and in the middle of it it's minus 25 degrees at night.
Yeah.
So we were staying in their tent, and it started snowing, and the Changpas move. Basically, the Changpas have a semi-nomadic life, and they move with their animals and herds and everywhere. So I asked a question, and I said, but there are all these modern amenities. Why do you need to live this life now? Yeah. And this matriarch went out, got a bit of a snow in her hand, and came back and put that in her prayer beads in my hand, and said something very profound that changed me inside out, and said that nature was here before man, nature will be here after man. But nature is divine, and when we do and live life in accordance to divine, we seldom go wrong. And it changed my relationship with the natural world, because till then I would say pretty anthropocentric. And I think after that, it sort of became when I understood that, by allowing yourself to become an integral part of the natural world, you open a dimension of yours. I'm not sure if you have a pet. I have 2 dogs. And they say that if you have a pet, then a part of your soul finds a way that, otherwise it's not possible to experience that. And I think pets are our only way to experience the natural world as closely as possible in our living conditions. But these people live with nature all the time, and they live in reverence of nature. Next morning, they migrated. And I kid you not, I'll never forget that sight in my life. Men, women, sheep, dogs, and yaks all moved in a single line, like you would see migration on the Serengeti, for example. Behind was this whitewashed backdrop, all ice, and all walking in one line, separated, a little bit to separate different herds from each other. They were 10,000, 15,000 in number. They're not small. And they walked with such assuredness. I mean, if you and I were in the middle of that kind of a snowstorm, moving back Bistra, we would be so worried. When are we going to reach? They were walking complete trust in nature and its power over their life, and in reverence to it. And I think that as we are moving to this climate crisis, that reverence needs to come back. And I keep going back to it all the time, because that was one experience that changed the way I looked at nature, and it made me so reverential to nature, that it's, that's why I live where I live now.
Yeah. My God, what an amazing story. So this was the inspiring thing that we talked about. What was one of the biggest challenges that you faced on this journey? See, because as of now, we've spoken about all the amazing things that you've gone through. It all actually sounds like, other than like, okay, toilets in the bushes, which also you've said it so romantically that it actually didn't. If I've not been through the process myself, I would actually think, yeah, okay. But you've all made it sound like really everything was so fabulous. But that's not possible. What was the challenge on this journey?
I think the challenge was first. I think I would say there were three challenges. First challenge, I told you that thank God I could surmount it early in the journey, where I had a lot of preconceived notions, and I think my learning was limited in the first 7 days of the trip. So that kind of the dropping of that helped. I think the second challenge was the fact that you are on a road, and there are things that sometimes will not work for you. The weather, the food. It's not easy. I'm a vegetarian. So imagine me in the Northeast. So I remember we went to a house in Nagaland to take shelter, and those guys, the Nagas eat their meat by drying it, especially in the rural areas, by drying it on the fire, and it's dried meat. And, I said I'm vegetarian, and they didn't know where to look because they had nothing to offer me to eat, and they were so embarrassed. So then they went and got Maggie from somewhere and cut raw onion and put in it so that it wouldn't look like they gave me some meat. But food was challenging sometimes in certain places where vegetarian food was hard to get by.
Yeah.
Although luckily I eat eggs, and there was always Maggie available. And I think the last was, of course, in certain parts of the country, there was, we almost got kidnapped once. Yeah, because you're driving through pretty hinterlands, and we were driving from Unnakoti in Tripura to Aizawl in Mizoram, and we decided not to take the regular highway through Silchar, but in Assam, but we would go over the mountains, and we got lost. And when we crossed a checkpoint, a police officer told us that, look, if you go any further, you'll be kidnapped. And there is a forest area that you have to clear. It's called Damparang Pui. And if you don't clear it before sundown, then you're going to get kidnapped. And, we made it by a thin margin. But that was a very it was an experience. I mean, and at some point we had an ambush, and we thought, oh God, here we are, we're kidnapped. I remember before entering the forest, while there was network, I called up Dad and I said, listen, I might get kidnapped. He said, maine paisa dene wala. So you decided to do all this on your own. You can't risk the company and everything. I said, no, but I'm letting you know I might get kidnapped. This is serious. He said, I don't care. What can I do now? If you don't get kidnapped, then call me. So, but the locals were helpful. They gave us directions, and we were able to make it. But yes, we almost got ambushed. So you do have safety concerns when you go to hinterland. It's not so
about safety, and this was one of them, and it would be a challenge. But the other thing that one wonders, and like your mother said, in a certain way, your mother was worried about अकेली जा रही है 3 लड़कों के साथ. That was a different. But you are a woman traveling, and there are so many stories one hears. So what was that a challenge? As a woman, was that a challenge? Maybe if it was not in Northeast, was it there in some other part of the country where being the woman was a challenge, and the traveling, late nights, dark, early mornings, just the 4 of you, and was that a challenge?
So a rider here, I mean, I come from a completely male-dominated industry, right? Transport and logistics. I don't see females at all. So my comfort level with a very aggressive, very hardy male presence is very high. So I may be also kind of not sensitive if some men were looking at me in a particular way, because I was like, okay, whatever. Because I'm used to that. Probably maybe some other woman would have been more sensitive. So that's a rider there. Because
sometimes you don't have to be sensitive also, even if you're trying not to be sensitive, sometimes it's in your face and you cannot deny it. Did anything of that sort happen? Did you feel?
No, not really. Maybe because there were 3 men with me, but I would also say that because I was a woman, many places our interviews became easier, both with men and women, because they found a woman to be a safer person to speak to. Okay. And I did not get eve teased or handled badly anywhere across the country. every single state, including the ones that we continue to keep hearing sometimes horror stories from, which is the UP Bihar belt or whatever. In fact, one of my co-travelers commented when we entered Bihar saying, "What has happened to Bihar? This used to be like cowboy country. How come it has gotten also civilized?" Because he had gone to Bihar 20 years ago and things had shifted on the ground. So I don't think that it was such a big challenge, although I do think that having three men in the car was a very big safety for me. I'm not sure if it was a car only full of women, there would not be challenges. So there could be challenges, of course, in certain parts.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Interesting. So, we did
But you know, Sally, I feel that we women also sometimes need to degender our head and kind of say, if you want to do and pursue something, right? If you want to go climb Mount Everest or go on a drive or go to the South Pole, then you've also got to rise above your own inhibitions and accept that, yes, the world is overtly male dominated, but it is then women like you that can change the way for a lot of other women. So I think we also have to sometimes degender ourselves in our head. We sometimes, I find sometimes some women will be overly gendered in their head about being.
Yeah, politically incorrect thing to say again nowadays, but somewhere, yeah, I do agree with you to a certain extent about it. Because I do feel that when you're traveling, these are the challenges I have faced, not just in India, in fact, more when I've been out of the country also. So it's not like, as a woman, I think it's been the same in most of the places. So
I mean, I don't think our guys come and flirt with us as much as carpet sellers in Turkey will with you. I mean, think about it. Or the Italian bistro guys will. So please, I mean,
Yeah. Yes, it's the way. Yeah, interesting. So what was the most influential moment in the journey? This journey is fascinating me completely because I still cannot get over the fact that you just picked yourself up and done this whole journey and then written a book about it and, without really planning it. So I'm just trying to understand and pick out these various things from a journey like this. I don't see myself taking on this kind of a journey. So I'm trying to live vicariously in this zone.
Well,
yeah.
As we were driving down from Ajanta Ellora towards Karnataka, Edgy, who was the rally driver in the car, said, "Listen, I know Krishna Dev Raya, the 19th descendant of the Vijayanagara family. We should all go to Hampi." And Mahesh was like, "Damn, it's like end April. Are you crazy? The Deccan will be like burning. We can't." Yeah. And Edgy was like, "No, we all have to go to Hampi and meet Krishna." And I went and met Krishna, and I realized that this mechanical engineer who was in the US came back and was rebuilding his ancestral home using old lime and mortar technique, including the bell sort of going around the lime and mortar and crushing it and rebuilding it. And he had this vision of reconstructing, restoring the whole of Hampi like that. That's 1600 monuments. And I said, wow, that kind of commitment to where you come from. How many of us are willing to dedicate our life to it? That you leave something that you were doing somewhere, you come back and you take the hard road to resurrect your heritage back. Wow. And the kind of challenges he mentioned he faced from government not finding right skill set because, we don't have restoration artisans in the country as many as we should. And, he's in that process to, maintain and conserve and restore Hampi's lost glory. And I came back so influenced and I said, we should all find that little monument in our village or our city and at least do that much. If this man is willing to, do it across an entire sort of, vast area.
Heritage site and it's huge and it's beautiful.
It is beautiful, yes. And so he is trying his best to revive everything about it. And I think, so I went back to my village in Gujarat and found a stepwell. It's called a Brahma Kund, and been trying to form a little committee in the villages and restore And he's right. It's hard to find. There are no restoration artists. You don't get permissions. It's so hard. But I said at least I should do that much.
I think a book will come out of that also.
Hopefully.
Well, I hope so. So this journey and everything, what are the couple of actionable points that you can say for individuals like me, our readers, who have been through this book and are impressed by it, and what are the actionable things that you think this journey um, has made you realize that you can share with us? Maybe some of us as individuals can use.
Well, I think one is that please
Find
travel.
your monument to restore. That is the one. I want to remember that one.
Well, I think first just travel, even if you can't do a huge journey. India is so full of amazing places and stories that we can all take out that one weekend, the long weekend of a week to go and explore something, go deep dive. Where sometimes we don't spend as much time knowing our own country. I think knowing yourself also gives you a great assuredness to see the world differently.
Right.
For me, when I work with people everywhere, whether it's for policy, whether it's for business, I'm able to respond in a much more assured way because I know myself better today. So I think that's the first. The second, I think we all have, like the book says, we all have our own individual superpowers. You are a creative person. You're doing this amazing thing. You've taken your creativity, you're sharing it with everyone. You're bringing everybody part of the process through this book club. And all of us can do that. We can all bring our individual power. We all have powers. Maybe not all the superpowers listed there, but some. And we should call them to action for ourselves, for others, because I think that's what it means to be an Indian, is to share what we have and make the table longer.
Interesting. So, what do you think the future holds for India?
For our country?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's very bright, purely for multiple perspectives. We are a democratic nation and we've stabilized that democracy significantly well, at least from a political process perspective. And that's a rare thing. If you look at all the nations that were birthed at the same time, we kind of stand out. Given our size, that's no mean feat. We're also a good, growing, self-assured economy now. So good things, we'll have money, we have the system. Where I think the challenge will come is that if we lose our moral compass, and when I say moral compass, I don't mean right or wrong. I don't mean, whose stories zyada badi, zyada choti. No, I don't think so. I think what I mean is that compass about the fact that our way is the collective way, that our way is the fraternal way, right? And if we lose the moral compass of that societal, the fraternal bonding that we share, then we are headed for a mess, which is going to be very difficult, because we will go away from what is truly against our grain, as they say. When you do things that is not in your nature, then they become very difficult. Sometimes you come out of the difficulty, sometimes you don't.
Takes long.
And a lot of price paid for it, and we shouldn't be paying that price, because if we do things right, and that's what the book is about, that if we call our powers to action, not just for ourselves, but if the government also makes an environment where individuals are able to contribute more, then I think nothing can stop us, Sonali. Nothing. And we will be a hope onto the world, because we would have created a model of development and societal life that we can offer to the world. And I really hope that despite all the things that are staring at us in face, the collective will of the people, which is very, very strong, will prevail. And the collective way of the people will also prevail.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. What about you? What's next for you?
Well,
what is your future like?
well, my future is that as I told you, I live half the year in a little village in Munsiari. And I'm very concerned for the natural well-being of the Himalaya. They control the climate, not just for our country, but of the planet. And I want to spend a lot of time resurrecting those natural ecosystems, preserving them, giving those communities tools to work in partnership with nature for their livelihood. So a lot of that for me. And I don't know, maybe another drive coming up when India goes
Interesting.
to election again in 2024, a 10-year gap, but
Yeah.
maybe another drive coming up.
Interesting. I think what you're looking at and what you're planning to do and what you're thinking of doing, I mean, I can only hope and pray that you achieve all of that, because the future of us is in what you're talking about. And so really looking forward to that, and praying and hoping for all the best things to happen for this endeavor of yours. And looking forward to your next book. I hope the next travel brings out another book, and we shall then feature it. Hopefully the book club should be on till then, and we will feature it then also. But,
Thank you so much.
thank you, Bhairavi. It was such a pleasure talking with you, having this conversation with you, reading this book, because there's so many things that are that we think are so us, and I think I'll speak on behalf of most of the people who are reading this book and part of the book club, that the things that we think are just so taken for granted, and yet now when it's pointed out and you realize that that it's not, let me just put it this way, it's not as bad as we think it is.
No, not at all.
And that there is hope, and there is a future, and I think every individual kind of needs to, I think the line for me from this talk is that every individual needs to find their monument to restore, and that doesn't have to be physical.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And let me just say thank you. It has been so amazing to have this conversation. I learned a lot from the way you're asking questions, and I hope everybody in the book club enjoys the book. And yes, I have a home, so you're welcome if you ever come to the Himalayas to come over.
I'm definitely going to look you up on that, take you up on that, and we shall meet.
Thank you very
much. It's a pleasure.
Oh.
Bye-bye. See you.